about best practices for fair research software. And we are glad to be here in the ESIP summer meeting. Today we are together with you presenting Michelle Barker, the Director of the Research Software Alliance, Sandra Hessing from the Scientific Outreach and Daily Lead and Discovery Partner Institute. Then we have Lorraine Wang, which is the Director of Computational Infrastructure for Geodynamics. And my name is Paula Martinez, and I am the Community Manager for the Research Software Alliance. We have prepared the slides for you to be alongside, and the URL is it's displayed, and we'll paste that in the chat as well. We would like to start recognizing the lands that we are coming from or working from, and the connection to them, the communities. For example, in the US, the Native American nations of Peoria and Tonga, and Tatwin and Miwok people. In Australia, the lands of Waluraba, Yidinji, Yirakinji, and the Yugara people. This part is just some housekeeping notes for you. We have a collaborative document that you can access through the Kiko chat. We also have this tiny URL prepared for you. That's going to be shared in the chat. In that collaborative document, we have different sections for you to work along this session. We have an attendance list that we encourage you to fill out your details, and especially if you'd like to stay in touch, we can write the notes there. We encourage you to write all your questions in the collaborative documents as well, and so we can answer them even if we don't have time during the session. And again, the slides for this session are also shared. Please be reminded that this session, as part of the ESIP summer meeting, has some community participation guidelines, and you can also report any issues that you encounter. The link of the guidelines and the participation, the link of the participation guidelines is also in the collaborative documents at the top heading. We have the following aims for this session. First, to present some updates about FAIR principles for research software. Then we're gonna go through a few communities and how they are involved. And then what opportunities do you have as attendees to become involved in the evolving policy development? For today's 1.5 session, I just finished with the introduction. Then you'll hear from Michelle about the Research Software Alliance and an introduction to the FAIR4RS. Then Sandra will give us an overview of 3 different communities that are engaged in this work as well. Lorraine, at the middle of the session, will take some questions from attendees from the communities that you just heard, and also going to explain how the breakout rooms is going to work. And during the breakout rooms, we're going to separate in 4 smaller groups so we can discuss and take some information into the collaborative documents, and then we will report back and take conclusions. That's all for me, and I will welcome Michelle next.
Thanks, Paula. If you can keep screen sharing, that would be fantastic. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Barker, the Director of the Research Software Alliance, which is an international organization formed with the mission to bring research software communities together to collaborate on the advancement of research software. We'd like to acknowledge thanks from our funders, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation and the Wellcome Trust, who support both RESA and the FAIR for its work itself. Next slide, please. So FAIR for Research Software, or FAIR4RS, is a joint group convened by the Research Data Alliance, the Research Software Alliance, and Force 11, which has a couple of aims: to develop community-endorsed application of the FAIR principles to research software, which should complete in a few more weeks, and then to provide some adoption guidelines and use cases. You can go to the website there if you'd like more information in addition to what I give here on these slides, and also to sign up to become a member if you'd like to be on our email list. Next slide, thanks. This working group on Fair for RS formed over a year ago now, with the motivation that in recognition that software is different to data. So you're probably all familiar with the concept of FAIR principles. The FAIR guiding principles were published in 2016 by Wilkinson et al. And said that all digital objects should aim to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And the FAIR principles have been applied extensively to data over the last 5 years. But it was only in the last couple of years that work began to think about how they might apply to software. And these are some examples of international documentation that happened both before our group started and during our work to reinforce that there needed to be a little bit more thought about how the FAIR guiding principles could be interpreted when they're applied to software. Next slide, thanks. Over the last year, we've run a wide range of community consultations and subgroups to go through a lengthy process with a number of different stages to get to this point today, where we have draft FAIR principles for research software. And this is what they look like. So similar to the original FAIR guiding principles in 2016, they have 4 sections: the F, the A, the I, the R, and a number of principles beneath each of those headings. So these differ in some ways to the original FAIR guiding principles. What we originally did was took those and essentially asked as a starting question, if every time it says data in the FAIR guiding principles, we change that to software, would that make sense? And for some of the principles, actually it did. For some of them it didn't. And then we had to think, do we delete these? Do we reword it in some way? And also, are there principles related to software that we need to create from scratch? And so this is the draft as it currently stands. It's just gone through a formal community review process and will be finalised in the next few weeks. Next slide, thanks. The working group still has another 6 months to run, or a bit longer, and we'll now be thinking about the fact that it's fantastic to have principles, but we all know that there's a lot more work that then needs to be done to think about how to enable adoption. So we'll be looking at how to create some adoption guidelines and identify existing best practices. There's a range of work already that already exists that, of course, contributes to helping people understand how to make their software fair. And in the breakout groups today, we'll be doing a bit of discussion to help all of you identify things in your local context, software you may be working on or associated with that is in fact fair, or at least partway fair, that it addresses some of the principles. And this is a great exercise to help people realize where some adoption has already happened, but also where there are more steps needed, where there are other elements of the FAIR principles, where the software you're working on, or where the adoption guidelines that you work with on best practice for software development could do with a bit of extension to incorporate some more of the thoughts in the FAIR for research software principles. So we'd be keen to hear of any other adoption guidelines that perhaps we could work with from your context. Next slide, thanks. FAIR for research software principles are also themselves part of a much bigger effort to create a roadmap around this. If there's one thing we can learn of the application of the FAIR guiding principles to data, is that once you have the principles, there are many, many other steps needed even beyond adoption guidelines and identifying use cases to help people understand how they could apply them. If we think about all the FAIR data conversations that you may have seen in ESIP or in other forums, there's other areas that need discussing, such as FAIR for research software training curriculums, or interoperability, or metadata, or governance, or metrics, or application in a particular discipline. So we're starting to form some other working groups to look at this application of the FAIR for research software principles in particular environments. Metrics working group and a life sciences working group has already formed. And one of the questions that we'd like to also ask you to consider today is, by the end of our discussion, would there be momentum in this group to form a working group focused on the earth sciences? Next slide, thanks. And that's my final slide, actually. If you are signing into the collaborative notes document at the top, where we've asked you to include some of your details, you can also, there's a box right at the end of the sign-in where you could indicate if you could be interested in joining that kind of working group. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And yeah, thank you all for joining. So I will talk about SGCI, ERSI, and USRC. And SGCI is the Science Gateways Community Institute. And it's really around the community of developers, of users, of providers of Science Gateways. And we use Science Gateways mostly in the US as a term, but we see it really equivalent to virtual research environments, to platforms. So in Australia, it's platforms. It was virtual labs for a while, or you have maybe heard about collaboratories or online platforms. So everything that really helps to do research in a more usable way and connect complex research infrastructures and data infrastructures in a way that users can use it more intuitive or more self-explanatory, we see as Science Gateways. And so SGCI is partnering with the Go Fair US office. And at the moment, we are offering these services, for example, an incubator, diverse expertise on demand, like usability experts, sustainability experts. We have, for example, a focus week, a training that has the sustainability considerations in projects. For example, looking at a project like if you would be an entrepreneur, what do you have to do that it's still sustainable in 3 years? What kind of role plays what you are developing for different user communities? Or the extended developer support, you can get longer term support engagements, like that really developers helping you with setting up your own Science Gateway virtual research environment. Or we have the Scientific Software Collaborative, where we have now over 600 different informations about catalog of data, but also software, Science Gateways, everything that is really working for Science Gateways. Yeah, we have the community engagement and exchange area, a yearly conference, and the workforce development. And with the Go Fair US partnership, what we are looking into, and this approach is currently also open for discussion. We are happy to get feedback. So what is really a good way of testing fairness of source code? Because with Science Gateways and virtual research environments, we are in two spaces. One is that Science Gateways often also offer data. And then it's really providing data in a fair way. But it could be also, for example, that the Science Gateways themselves as infrastructure, as model, as workflows, really also are offered as a fair solution. So can we use maturity indicator tests, for example, for the source code in repositories? Do we want maturity indicator test via Science Gateways to allow access to data objects? So, and one of the ideas is to create for solutions badges, and to really say if a solution or if providing software has this badge with a date, that is what kind of fairness is offered by the solution. So that is something we are looking into in the partnership between SGCI and the Go Fair US office. Next slide, please. So the other thing is, well, you might have heard about USRC. It's the US Research Software Engineer Association. And we had really membership growth, as you can see in the last 2 years, which is very linear, very straight up, which we are very happy about. I'm one of the I'm on the steering committee. I'm one of the founding members of the association, and we looked on, because that is also plays also a role in fairness for data and programs, that people can exchange information with each other, when best practices on fairness are also advertised in communities like the research software engineers, and that they can support it with the software and the data they're working with and the research they're working with. So we looked into how to build a community around research software engineers, and what could be maybe for the FAIR community also the lessons learned from this. And you need enthusiastic members to kick it off. So we hope with today that that you really also that we have enthusiastic members who would be happy to be part of a working group. So at USRC, we have workshops and monthly community calls, for example, and we have seen jumps. You see, for example, around June 2019, also a jump, so often after events. So when we give presentations at conferences or webinars, or we have our own events, that people are aware of that being part of this community and exchanging best practices, that this is all really helpful for their own working in research with software. Yes, website, Slack channel, we have lively discussions in that Slack channel, and every community is different in that regard. I know that I have other Slack channels where it's more once in a while. USRC is really very active on the Slack channel. We have bi-monthly newsletters and an RSE podcast where you can hear about experiences, career paths of different research software engineers. We have working groups. We are always open to have more working groups, of course. And somehow, I'm sorry about that, something went wrong with the formatting here. That was probably my mistake by copying things. So we have 3 working groups, diversity, equity, inclusion working group, and we have a speaker series there, a book club where we discuss topics and content. We have a website working group. We would like to update to a new website. And we have a training and education working group. And I see, would you prefer a question here, or is there a Slido or other forum? You can put here questions in, and also I don't mind to be interrupted, by the way. So if you have questions for me in between, I'm happy to take questions in between. So with USRC, it's really also, this is a forum where best practices about FAIR for research software can be exchanged, but also which would be an interesting partner for ESIP to work with, to have, exchange with research software engineers who are working also in earth sciences and in projects there, in national labs and academia at universities. Next slide, please. So ERSI is the US Research Software Sustainability Institute, the conceptualization of it. And it's now 3 years old. And we have 5 co-PIs, and I've seen that one of my co-PIs, Dan, is also in the session here. And we have 16 senior personnel, so the official phase just ended in June, and the idea was really to have a look at the research software landscape ecosystem in academia and the national labs, and to partner with other institutions who are supporting really research software and the importance of research software in academia. And we developed this, you can see here, we did 3 ethnographic studies. We had a winter school with 30 students. We got 169 applications for this one winter school we piloted, which was very exciting. We had 47 public talks, 9 newsletters, 36 blog posts, and 5 workshops where really we asked what is a gap in the research software ecosystem, what needs to be addressed. And we sent out a survey, and we will publish the results soon. So where we get answers from 1,200 people, over 1,200 people, and which is really fantastic from all these different communities, from humanities, arts and design, to engineering, and also to earth and environmental sciences and ecology, where people said what they could answer what is really missing, what is missing in the ecosystem on the one hand side for the people, for the developers, but also for the researchers. What is missing when it comes to research software engineering? What kind of best practices are needed? And I think this is also important for looking at our conceptualization for really fairness of research software and looking at the different domains. And this is part of the plan, of course, also today here. So if you are interested in the plan and what we would like to do in the future, you can find also the plan here. And thanks, Michelle, for posting it also. So you can find it here. And I think the discussions are really important, how to integrate it in the ecosystem. So when there once are the rules, and maybe already then also something like badges, like tests, like maturity indicator tests, that it's also distributed through the different communities and available for everyone who works with data and software. And this was my last slide, I think, and I will give it then to Lorraine. If you look at the next slide, it should be Lorraine's slide, I think. Yes.
Great. Thank you, Paula, Michelle, Sandra. We're running on time, which is always a good thing. We're segueing into the Q&A session, but while you're typing in your Q&A session, we thought we'd introduce you to the breakout groups. So this will give you some time to think about which breakout group you want to join, as well as give us a little bit of time to set up the rooms as well. So just on the logistics part, the breakout groups start at 45 after the hour. There are 4 breakout groups. They're 20 minutes each. We come back, we do a short report back. Each of the breakout groups, you should have a note taker, a timekeeper, and a reporter. Of course, you may also multitask as well in doing those. Okay, so what is the purpose of the breakout groups? Okay, so the purpose of the breakout groups is as Michelle, I think, indicated, is one of the main tasks for the Fair for Us working group is to produce a document. And that document not only summarizes the Fair for Us principles, but it also gives implementation guidelines and adoption examples. So the purpose of the breakout group really is to look at what adoption guidelines could we work with, especially from the earth sciences. So we know that there's a lot of really great work that's been done out there, a lot of good best practices. So we like to see, look out to see what these are, and also to see where people may need help. I think, you know, when we step through Fair for Us, there are things that are kind of pretty easy to kind of meet, and there are things that are kind of tougher. So we like to know what you think about those tough things, and what are the questions and what you might need help with. So there's 4 groups, as I said. So we're going to run 2 project-specific groups and 2 more general groups. We figured that this group has probably a lot of experience at the project level with their individual workflows, their software, their data. So we like to get to know what those examples that you may have. There's also will be one group on a sort of the next step up, more generalized software that may be a lot of projects use in common, that may be considered community software, or larger software projects that go beyond just a single research group. So we're going to call them that discipline-specific software. So these are tools and libraries of science gateways that you may use that could implement disciplinary models and methods. And then we're going to even take it one bigger picture further, and that's the infrastructure software, that is libraries, utilities. For research in many disciplines, it may not just be earth sciences, it could be engineering, it could be biological sciences. So these are the bigger picture things. It could be operating systems, compilers, and support code, etc. So those are the 4 groups. We'll have a 3-minute report back afterwards. Again, those start at 45 minutes after the hour. Okay, so I'm going to let you think about that. If you have questions about the breakout groups, feel free to type those into the questions as well. And encourage you, if you end up in a breakout room that has a lot of people, maybe you have multiple interests, feel free to hop around in breakout groups as well. Okay.
So we have one question. So maybe I will try to answer this. And I say I will try to answer this because with the badges, it's at the moment this idea to have something like a fair badge about software or about data in a way, because fair principles, we all know, is a suggestion. And I don't like to say that badges are something, where people feel like, oh, if I don't get this or this for my data or for my software, then it's not a fair, then my software is not fair. I think there's different purposes of software, so we have to be very careful what we say, what kind of level, it's more, the badge would be something like an indicator, and it could include also, let's say, for example, preservation systems. So if you check the fairness of preservation systems, there might be really some things, it should be not reproducible in the preservation system itself. Again, it should be reusable. So there might be just that there's not an environment to directly start processes again, and that is on purpose. So to give it then not a good fairness, let's say not best practices fairness scale would be wrong. So I think we have to be very careful with badges and really give reasons why certain indicators are hit, and where also the owners of the software or the community can say, oh, this is on purpose. We have this scale here because we have this goal with the software, or we have with this data because it's, health data we cannot share further than unidentified or something. There is a reason why it is this way. So I think with the badges, that is the idea, to have a date on it, that people can really also indicate, oh, this is something we work on, and this is something on purpose. Does that answer the question?
I'm going to add to Sandra's thoughts here, is that you need to consider exactly what the purpose of your badge is, right? So is your purpose of your badge a contributorship role? There's projects like, is it allcontributors.org? That has a way to sort of add that to like a GitHub repository. Is your purpose of it to some sort of certification of your software? We just heard a very interesting presentation. I think it's Michael Barton from ComSess, I'm gonna screw that up, about how they actually have a badging now when they actually review their software. So they have a peer review process, and if it passes peer review, that software gets a DOI.
So yeah, the idea is really to have exactly some different kind of flavors of fair badges. Yeah. Okay.
Here are the questions or anything people want to bring up for discussion. Thoughts again on, we were just sort of, in essence, having a small discussion on contributorship roles and, credit for software, I think was the heart of that. Any questions on the Fear for Us principles, people, or the breakout groups? Well, if there are no questions, what do the organizers think about heading out to the breakout groups early? People often have a lot to contribute and talk about, so we can give people extra time. I do notice the math and the agenda does not quite work for me. So maybe right now we're running about 9 minutes ahead. So why don't we add maybe about 10 minutes to the breakout groups, make them 25, 30 minutes long. And then people will be dumped out as Zoom does. And we'll be back in the room all together at some time, whatever that time is. I think we'll be close to schedule. For those who have not tried to join out a breakout group before, I think you go to, oh, it's not showing up in mine here. Maybe the breakout groups haven't been assigned yet. I think you go to the 3 dots, look at more breakout groups, look up the breakout groups. They'll show you who's joining the room. To the right, if you mouse over to the right, you should pop up a join button and just click join, and that will bring you into a breakout group.
I just opened the rooms, Lorraine. Can everyone see them now? You should be able to see group 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Right. So yeah. So you go to 3 dots at the bottom is breakout rooms. You'll see the groups, and then if you mouse over the number in the room, you should get a join button, and we will see you all.
Hold on, Lorraine, can you put the slide back up that showed what rooms people should join so they recall?
Absolutely. Okay. I think, Paula, do you have control of that? I'm actually not a co-host.
Okay, let's see. You should, or anyone on the team should be able to share. If you just want to remind folks, there you go.
There we go. Yeah. So again, we have 2 project-specific ones, a discipline-specific, and then an infrastructure one.
And it looks like people are going into those groups now, and I will hang out here in the main room. And Lorraine, I'll make you a co-host as well, because co-hosts are able to go into leave and enter different rooms. So awesome. You are now a co-host, so you should be able to go in and out.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, then I go already to my group 3.
Sorry, Annie, how do I go to different groups? Let's see if I want to go to group 1.
If you go to group 1, so do you see where it says, are you on the browser version or the application?
Application.
You should see.
Okay. Group
it?
Rooms. Okay, I got it.
Okay, good.
Okay, I'm going to my breakout. See.
Okay. Yes, I can do that, Sean. If anyone is having a hard time figuring it out and would like me to move you over, you could just send a message and I can assign you to a group.
Yeah, I say group. I don't know how to join. Can you just put me there?
Yep. Which one would you like?
Sorry for the trouble.
That's okay.
Group 1. Group 1 would be good.
Okay.
You mouse over the number that's in the right part of the group name.
Yeah, and then you should have a drop down join. But if anyone else,
got you.
If anyone else is having trouble, let's see, Michelle 1. Okay. Oh, it looks like Michelle already figured that out. David, I'm going to give you to group 2. Okay. Anyone else having trouble getting into their groups, let me know and I could add you to a group. $250. realized I was yammering on here. Benita, would you like to be moved into a breakout group? It looks like you're the one that we don't have moved somewhere. If not, you're welcome to hang out here. Looks like P. Sheng is in a group. All right. Marian, I'm just going to turn my video off, and they said they wanted 20, I think, do you remember if it was 20 minutes or 30 minutes in the breakout?
I'll look right now, but I know they added 10 minutes to whatever it was.
Yeah. I could look on there.
We're looking at Breakouts 45 until an hour and 12 minutes. So that's about 30 minutes.
Okay. So I'll give them a message at the top of the hour that they've got like 10, 15 minutes left. So you're saying they should be alerted at 3:15, or I guess 15 after.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's when they plan to do report backs. Is that like 12 after?
Okay. At 12 after. Okay. So at 50 or at 2 after the hour, I'll give them a 10-minute warning.
That sounds good.
Okie dokie. Let's see.
Hi, if people are just joining, we're in breakout rooms right now, so you can assign yourself to a breakout room if you want to go join in on those discussions.
Hi, everyone, as you're coming back. It's like the other people are going to zip back here in about 15 seconds. Thank you. It's good. Hi, everyone. Okay, I think the room's closed, so everyone is coming back. Let's see, of the session leaders, who is going to be in charge of the report out emceeing?
Lorraine was
Lorraine.
there.
Okay, I will highlight Lorraine's video so we could see her. Co-host. All right, there's Lorraine.
I got dumped out rudely.
That's what Zoom does.
No, I've been totally out of the application, not even back to the main room. I had to like,
Oh, you were taken out of
yeah.
Zoom entirely. All right. Well, I have spotlighted your video for everyone to see, Lorraine, if you want to lead the report outs.
Okay, well, I am waiting to see where my other co-organizers are back. So Sandra back, Paula, Michelle, great. And yes.
We are back, yeah.
You. What's that?
We are back.
Yeah, okay, great. I think I have, I'm gonna change my view so I see everybody, great. Okay, so let's just start at the top, I guess, with report backs, 3-ish minutes. So who is the reporter for group 1?
It's me, Michelle. So I'll get us started. So we had a very active group of about 10 people. And to try and answer the questions as posed, what aspects of FAIR for RS are already being addressed? There's a lot of discussion on the ways in which findability and accessibility are being addressed, but noting that issues like interoperability and reusability are far more complex. To think about what can be improved, a lot of our discussion really focused on whilst we still need better tools or adoption guidelines, those kinds of things to help progress the work, there's an underlying piece around motivation that can still be a blocker, that in some parts of earth sciences, there's not even a culture of data sharing. We have a wide spectrum of researcher interest in being able to share, in seeing the benefits of doing so. And people in our groups shared some resources on how they've seen great motivational work in events or in their organization, so that researchers are happy to start on that journey, or wherever they're at, to then think about the next step. So there was a range of different approaches elucidated. There's some mention of the benefits of software management plans, which aren't, of course, mainstream, but are starting to be used a little bit more, or at least integrating consideration of software issues into data management plans or output management plans. There was a bit of discussion on how AGU aims to play a role in addressing some of this, and there's going to be some updated guidelines for journals coming out in maybe later this week that could be useful. We talked about some of the different tools that are useful, and so there's some links in our chat notes which everyone can access if people want to see some of the things that our group found useful. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Let's see what group 2 has to say on that topic as well. See if they've come up with some of the same or have something completely different.
We got into some of the questions. So there was some discussion around the tools about what makes something fair. So Zenodo was brought out as an example, and I think there was a range of experience around that particular question. We did go through a couple of different examples of some things that people were working on. And from at least my perspective, we had an example of something which is being developed now, not quite released. And that's easier to bring into alignment with the FAIR principles, and some examples of things that have decades of technical history. And that presents a different set of challenges for bringing them into alignment with FAIR principles, even assuming people being very motivated to do that. And then a little bit of discussion. It happens to be one of my particular points, so it came out. But this idea of, am I trying to deal with citations and identifiers for credit, in which case I really want to reference the concept of a thing, or am I trying to use identifiers to get at reproducibility, in which case I want to point to a very, very specific instance. And that's something that I see as a tension. And then there's a little bit more in the notes about some of the specific examples. Anything else from group 2 that I didn't touch on that somebody wants to bring out?
I think that's a good summary. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think the last point is really interesting. Our group ended up talking about reuse, and a lot of it really has to do with intent. You know, what is the intent of what are you trying to get at? Group 3.
Yeah.
That was the larger infrastructure software projects.
Yes. So I will give the summary. And so what we talked about additionally also, so for example, that there's, with the larger software packages also, people don't know what is all out there. So it would be nice to have something like a knowledge graph, not to reinvent libraries and packages again. And the other thing is trust. So how do you know that you can trust them? So if you are not the primary developer, and if you are a newcomer to the community, and you know, even if there's documentations, so it's still, if people just throw the GitHub at you with you know 10 million lines of codes, then it's not very transparent or understandable. And so one of the ideas was to really tell stories about software, to say how it was developed. How, you know, the example was that there are Jupyter notebooks who explain how the data was created. So maybe we need something similar, really, where people can see, oh, that this is the software, how it was developed. This is a piece of a formula that was, you know, translated into software this way. So that there's really a non-technical translation to research software from the domain knowledge. So, and also if we look at industry, could we really use documentation of feature description like they do it in their software? So do we need something like a meta language that leads to programming and can be followed back to the theoretical background of a software package? So it was, yeah, we looked at different things there with the storytelling, and also the different dependencies and how reproducibility plays with, for example, containerizations and virtual machines and science gateways. So, and improving usability is really difficult. So we are on a good way in some things, but it's still a lot of work. And so projects really need probably something like graphic designers and artists to really have better documentation. And also we talked about best practices for research software documentation. There's not really this one template out there. And I think so what we at the end also discuss what would be something like a working group or the next steps that could be interesting in the context of ESIP. And that would be coming together in a working group and say, oh, this is the software. And I would like to create the storytelling piece for the software I'm using so that I can be sure that also other users can use it the right way, and that it's not this magic black box. Did I miss anything from our discussions?
It's an interesting point you bring up about the provenance of software, because I think FAIR talks a lot about the output of software and how you access the software and what it gives you. It really doesn't tell you about the quality of that software, what principles were used in its development, and what steps were taken to assure its quality. So that is a very good point, and something that we should all be concerned about in when we develop our software. Okay, so group 4, we didn't decide who was going to do the report back. Do I have any volunteers?
I'm happy to talk about what we said since I wrote it down.
Thank you.
No problem. So yes, what did we talk about? Yes, we talked a bit about what we kind of meant by infrastructure software as a starting point. So looking at big software packages that kind of go across disciplines. And one of the things we said is that a lot of these big ecosystems have different sort of issues relating to FAIR compared to smaller, more niche project-specific software. So, for example, a large software package like the main Python or R libraries, don't have a problem generally being findable. They're well known, but they may not be interoperable with various different other languages, particularly between big software packages. There's a kind of monolithic ecosystem that's built around these big infrastructure things, and moving to a completely different infrastructure thing can be quite difficult. So, and we're talking about some of the FAIR principles, not just about the software, but about the developers behind them. So some of the barriers between interoperability with software come from developers having particular skill sets. And so they kind of build a sort of silo around the skill sets that the developers have on a project, or the scientists. So it's also important to think about those kind of people issues around on FAIR software, how we can have the right skills to ensure that software works together and is reusable. That's quite an important takeaway. And in this context, we're thinking about reusability in terms of people, again, in terms of, well, who's actually using it. It depends on whether we're talking about being reused by other developers, being reused by end users, what sort of documentation we need. To a certain extent, I think there might be kind of developer documentation for people who want to develop the software, user documentation for people who want to use it, but also thinking about reproducing results. That's a different sort of reproducibility. What else have I forgotten from what we talked about? So you were talking about how kind of findability and accessibility are perhaps the easier elements of that for large and small software packages. Kind of just making stuff on GitHub and searchable, that makes it findable and accessible with, say, Conda environments. But the interoperability and reusability are generally the most difficult parts, because when you think about, okay, well, who's actually going to use it? What do they really want to do with it? So it's quite hard to standardize. Anything else you want to add to our discussion? There was lots of stuff in our discussion, so it'd be hard to summarize all of it.
Yeah, I think it looks like everybody's taking some really good notes. I know the other co-organizers and I will go through that and sort of try to digest it all. We're at that point where we're going to try to wrap up. I think, Michelle, we gave you the daunting task of trying to wrap up the discussions, what you heard, and maybe sort of head towards what possible takeaways do we have for this session.
Thanks, Lorraine. The final job, if you like, of this session is to summarize a few takeaways to put into the ESIP meeting takeaways document, which I've put into the chat. So right at the bottom of our document, our collaborative notes document, where all you've written the notes from your breakout groups, I've just summarized about eight points from the things that I heard from the feedback sessions from each breakout. If there are other things that you really think are important to add to that, or you'd like to massage any of that wording anyway, feel free. And then later today, my day Australian time, I'll put those into the takeaways document so that some of our discussion and learnings are captured. To think about the key questions, if you like, that we're supposed to consider in the takeaways. What did we discover? I think we had some good reflection on how to apply the FAIR principles and what are some of the enabling environmental issues to do with developer skill sets or motivations or career recognition. How can we help each other? I think this was a really valuable session. Certainly in my breakout group, there were links shared on tools that people could use or resources that others could find. And it's always fantastic just to know that others are having the same problem, and other groups are working on identifying solutions as well. And I hope that some of you have been able to connect with someone you haven't connected with before and realize that it might be useful to have a chat in the break time that's coming after this, and then maybe explore about how you could share knowledge a little further. I think the important remaining question for us as a group is how could we further this conversation within ESIP? How could we enable some deepening of this, a more structured way to share existing resources and to identify and share them, to think about what's needed, and how as a discipline, perhaps there could be some collaborative effort to create more motivational materials or adoption guidelines, or write up use cases or a range of use cases, so that this conversation continues. So in the collaborative notes document, as I said earlier, where you can sign your name in at the beginning, there's a column that says, are you interested in joining an ESIP working group? So if you want to go back to that and indicate that you would be interested, we could see if there's a critical mass to get something happening. And we're particularly interested to hear from anyone who might be keen to consider being involved in co-chairing that, to think about what we're trying to achieve and how we structure that to really get some great community engagement, to ensure that it's a community effort to move forward. So my final task is really to thank everyone. Thank you to all the ESIP organizers for getting us here. Thank you to my fellow conveners of this session for making this happen. And as always, thank you to all of you as contributors. The conversations in the breakouts, I think, were very rich. I'm dying to get in and see what the other 3 groups that I wasn't in were talking about, and what I can learn from those. We hope that this has been very useful for you, and I look forward to chatting with some of you in the break that proceeds after this. Anything else from any of my other co-hosts? Otherwise, we're ready to go. Lorraine's saying no.
No, just echoing, thank you everybody for participating. I'm really encouraged to see that there's some sure's and possibilities and maybes in the document. So hopefully we can get a working group going that represents your sciences, and see you guys the rest of the week and in other chat rooms and coffee.
Mm-hmm.